storytelling. In this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa, and let's go on an adventure. Welcome to this week's episode. In January this year, I went to Denmark for an artist residency and I interviewed 3 of the storytellers. Jeff was on a couple of weeks ago and this is Silvia's turn. Silvia and I discussed many things from setting up community storytelling circles to really going deep into the meaning and understanding of myths, fairy tales and folk tales. And then we talk about the difference between theatre and storytelling and the similarities and differences. It was a really great conversation that was done in person, so at some point during the episode you can hear the chooks in the background. I hope you enjoy this interview with Silvia. Welcome to this week's podcast. This week we are meeting with Silvia Lehmann, who is in Denmark. And like when we spoke to Jeff a few weeks ago, Silvia and Jeff work together. So I'd love to welcome you to the podcast, Silvia.
Oh, thank you.
So tell me about your storytelling journey. How did you come to be where you are now?
Oh, goodness. Well, I wanted to say I live in Denmark, which is a tiny town in the south coast of Western Australia, not Denmark, the country. I come to storytelling from theatre. I studied theatre arts at university as a sort of general subject, together with an arts degree, with English literature and history and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to the Victorian College of the Arts to study theatre directing as a craft itself. So it felt like a bit like an apprenticeship to do that. It was still a Bachelor of Arts, but very much concentrating on theatre directing as a skill. And I've been doing directing theatre sort of on and off ever since, putting it in between, having growing up kids. I've got 3 kids and, squeezing community projects in between. I've lived here in this tiny town for 16 years now, coming up 17 years actually. I've directed about 6 probably quite large community projects. So, where we start, I start with a creative writing kind of process, and then I've developed a collaborative scripting process together with Nicola Jane LeBreton, who I think you've interviewed, and then the script gets then rehearsed and performed by a selection of the people that helped write it in the first place. And we always have live music and lots of other components in it, sort of cross-art collaborations. And they're really great fun, and they are, I feel like theatre is at its core storytelling. It feels like I kind of veered off left sideways into storytelling from there. Partly because COVID happened, but I think it was also even before COVID, my friend Nicola and I had this idea. I had made a theatre show which was based on a Grimm's fairy tale called The Fisherman and His Wife, which was pretty much the fairy tale with snippets of writing, local writing and poetry, to kind of heighten the underbelly meaning of what might be going on in the story, and to ground it in the feeling of the local place. And everybody loved it. And at the same time, it was during a festival called Brave New Works, and at the same time, Christina Cairns did a storytelling show called The Wolf Bride. And Nicola had come down from Perth to see those things and was really excited. And she said, why don't we make a storytelling development program? Because this feels like, this could be, where people tell their own stories. We can do this mythopoetic storytelling thingy thing, where yeah, people write their own fairy tales and then perform it. So that was sort of this kind of crazy idea. And we kind of started that on a complete. It felt like we just threw ourselves in the deep end of this swimming pool called storytelling with absolutely not really much of a clue what we were doing. But we kind of knew that we wanted some kind of ritual element, and we started the journey with this guy called Randy Jones, who's a Canadian man that Nicola found through some storytelling friends up in Perth, who it turned out to be quite a wild card. But there's a few positive things that I take from him, and one of them was that he pretty much, in the weekend workshop he ran here, that you can turn anything into a ritual. You can just make them up. And so, yeah, for example, the way we started the storytelling development program, we got everyone to, meet at the Lights Beach car park, and we walked to a place called the Red Lake, which is this beautiful freshwater lake quite near the ocean. And we made, we took a local man as our guide called Mark Perret, who knows a huge amount about the local landscape, the flora and the fauna, and so he talked us through lots of things that he knew about the plants and the area, and the history and the geology and the biology of all this stuff. And then when we got to the start of the Red Lake, which has got this big granite top, we made a gate, like out of two, Nicola and Mark held these quite big sticks with a cross, and, we taught them a little song, which was based on a Rumi poem. Step through the threshold, step through the gate, step through the round door kind of thing. And people sang it while individually they walked up to the gate, and they had to tell Nicola and Mark why they were there and why they wanted to learn to tell stories. And they kept them there until they spoke something that opened the gate, and it was like this intuitive thing. And yeah, I feel like that really set the tone. It was like a sort of rite of passage for people to make their way through the gate, and you kind of had to drop into something like that felt really true to you, and then we did some writing exercises and so on, and and yeah, so Jeff was one of the participants, which was a real surprise to me at the time, because he was sort of the local lawyer in town and didn't really give any vibes that he was interested in doing any arty projects as such, and had never been involved in any of my theatre projects before. But yeah, so after that project was really successful, and everybody that participated, we had about 8 people, I think, perform in the end. So some performed their own written stories, and some performed traditional tales that they'd found that they liked. But then COVID happened, and I didn't do a lot during COVID. And then it was November 2023, or actually October, I think it was. Jeff approached me because he'd gone through quite a sort of life change and had taken himself off overseas, and had done some vision quests and workshops with Martin Shaw, and he'd really taken the storytelling on quite a bit. And yeah, he approached me in the street one day, I think outside the supermarket, as you do in Denmark, kind of said, hey, you know how we used to do these informal little gatherings when we were doing this storytelling development program. We used to just meet once a month, choose a country to tell tales about. Everybody chose a short tale to tell, and we brought some food from that country just as a sort of fun thing, And we had lots of fun with that. So he said, do you remember how we did that? Let's try and do that format and see if we get a sort of regular storytelling circle together, because I want to practice telling stories. So that was the intention behind that. So yeah, in November 2023, we ran this first monthly storytelling circle, and it really has taken off. So that's my journey into storytelling. It's a very long answer.
No, it's a great answer. So in terms of you telling stories, what does that look like? How does that present for you?
I've been really taken aback and surprised by how much I love telling stories. I kind of, as a kid and as a teenager, I loved performing, but for various reasons, just was never... there was always obstacles placed in my way. I was told I can't sing and I'm tone deaf, and everything that was on offer was musicals, and if I did get offered a part, my mum would say, I can't drive you to rehearsals all the time. So, there was always these obstacles that were in the way. And at some point, I kind of gave up on the idea of becoming an actor. That was sort of the original dream, and thought, well, theatre directing is much more my thing, because I hate the idea of sitting around waiting for an agent to ring me and being completely disempowered as an actor, and B, I really like creating my own work and creating, I got lots of visions for things and want to see it, turn them into reality with people. So yeah, I used to joke that occasionally I would put myself up to perform something just to remind myself how difficult it actually is to put yourself out there and to perform in front of an audience and to give of yourself and to receive, their input, their participation. It's quite a huge soul and spiritual experience. It was good to remind myself of it. But yeah, I think the storytelling, it sort of touches something that has been like a sort of little seed and a kernel, like my mum was very good at storytelling. She always used to, she told us stories from when she was a child in the wartime that were really disastrous family stories. But, the way she told the stories, she would always get me and my sister in tears. Like, we would always be sitting around the table crying when she told those stories. And she also used to tell us fairy tales, because her mum had told fairy tales and her grandma had told fairy tales. So, my mum still grew up. My parents are both German. So the way my mum grew up, she was born at a time when she was born in 1940, when my granddad was away, conscripted into the war. So the household was run by my grandma and her mother-in-law were living in the house, and lots of other family, but my mum's grandma, so my great grandma, would be sitting in the chair praying the rosary all the time, and then she would say to the kids, come and sit down, and she would tell them, Hansel and Gretel, and she would tell them all the Grimm's tales, she would tell them lots of these kind of tales, so the way she told them is also how my mum told them. So that's really nice. It feels like I remember that when I tell stories. And when I was 6, my dad worked, in IT. One of the sort of the first, he worked for IBM in the 70s when it was just first starting, with these big mainframe computers and kind of weird stuff. But it meant we lived in the United States when I was little. What they called on assignment for 2 years at a stretch, and one was between the time when I was 5 and 7. And so I started year 1 in America, in the United States, in California, near San Francisco. And I had a teacher called Mrs. Hooser, who really sticks in my mind. Yeah, she was really crazy. She had like bleached blonde hair and really long fingernails that were painted pale purple, and had, you know, white flares on, and, you know, like she was just like out there. And she ran a storytelling club after school. And, you know, she kind of put me in the category of shy German girl, because I, you know, had this terrible accent, you know, blah, blah, you know. And at some point she got me to read something out, you know, practice reading, as you do in year 1. And afterwards she said, "You're coming to my storytelling club after school." And I went, "Oh, really? Okay." So I used to go to this storytelling club. And I've only got very vague memories of that because I was just 6, you know. But yeah, I remember coming home and practicing Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And I announced I'm not speaking German anymore at home. I'm speaking English. And I'm going to be a storyteller. So it was, it's funny how these sort of memories kind of come back but yeah, so Mrs. Hooser kind of saw something, and it was really great. What I do remember from that is that she was like, "You are all really talented at standing up and making speeches, telling a story, you know, engaging the audience. You be confident. You stand up there and say your thing and do your, you know, the way you are is just fabulous, you know." And it's like such an American thing, which when we, you know, went back to Germany when I was 7 was like, you know, sit on your chair and be good and be quiet and write down and do what everybody else says and does. There was absolutely no storytelling club to speak of. And that was dampened further, you know, when we migrated to Australia. I was teased pretty horribly, and I just sort of really became very kind of insular and protective, and, you know, there was just no way I was opening myself up to anything. Yeah. It feels nice to revert back, you know, to that little 6-year-old and try and go, hey, I can engage an audience. And there is something, even though I kind of always rail against how we have relegated storytelling to that it's just for kids. You know, they're just little kids' stories and they're fun little stories for kids, and we sugarcoat them because some of those dastardly endings really aren't very good for them, and, you know, we need to make it palatable for ourselves to be able to tell that to our kids. And, you know, it's always, yeah, for these, you know, storytelling evenings, people go, "Oh, why are you doing that at night? Can't I just drop off my kid and leave you to it?" And it's like, no, stories are for you.
Why do you think adults need fairy tales and stories?
When I perform stories, there is something, I love that there is something kind of childlike about dropping into that space, because it is an archetypal space where it's like you can drop into another world where relationships and where journeys and where tasks are simplified or are really clear, really put in really clear terms. And it's a magical place. It's a magical place where, you know, where animals speak, where you can encounter the unencounterable, where miracles can happen, where people can transform into animals or transform from animals into humans, where, you know, all this transformation, all this possibility can take place. And I feel like the stories are older than time. You know, some of these stories, they got kind of captured in the 19th century because there was this romantic movement to try and capture, you know, the sort of traditions from the land, as the Industrial Revolution was just sort of sucking up, all the traditional life and skills and so on. But it feels like some of those tales have been transmitted orally, and we know this from the Indigenous people here in Australia, right, that there are stories that have been retained through cultural protocol so exact that they can be replicated by science, that, you know, that they are older than the Ice Age, you know, that they report events that really did happen like 10,000 years ago, and these stories tell of those events very accurately. So they have been transmitted from generation to generation to generation. And I feel like the tales in Europe, in old Europe, are the same. And there are absolutely seeds from the really old cultures that have been displaced. You know, in old Europe, we've had so many waves and waves of invasions, you know, the Mongolian horse people kind of sweeping in, and you know, lots of stuff that happened, and of course religious colonization and so I feel like some of these fairy tales can help us really dig down into our DNA and what actually feels like a bedrock of culture. And as a woman, I love the stories that they can do that, because I feel like at the very bedrock of old Europe sits a really old goddess culture, the original God figure, the original idea of something bigger than us, the breath of life that, you know, created life through the womb, you know, of a being, was, you know, because of course it's like the all and the nothing, so the masculine and the feminine are completely contained within that. It's just that I feel like the feminine was so important back in those old cultures, because women physically birth, and the reverence of this miracle, you know, it is an absolute amazing miracle. And as a woman, you know, having birthed a baby, you know, having birthed 3 babies, it's like it is completely beyond understanding how your own body, you know, can grow a new human being inside in this mysterious womb. You know, your body gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you have this amazing transformation, you know, this birth, this transition, this gateway, and this being, this soul gets birthed through you into the world as its own individual being, with its own soul journey, with its own, you know, trajectory, its own will, its own personality, its own sense of self, you know. And not only that, but then you can nurture that being, you know, into, you know, growing it into, you know, a healthy growing baby. You know, you're feeding it from your breasts, and it is an amazing ability that we women have. And I feel like, of course, that needs to be revered, and ought to be revered, and was revered. Our culture of the, you know, inverted tree of life of freaking male domination, of God being the judgmental God sitting in a cloud above us, kind of raining thunder and lightning down on us, and, you know, preaching, you know, fire and brimstone. So long story short, I feel like the fairy tales counter that, go past that. And yes, they've had religious stuff layered on top and Christian stuff layered on top. Some of, you know, like say the Grimm's fairy tales and whatever. But you can excavate. You can kind of drill down to something more essence. And I find these stories need to be told, and they need to be told more and more and more as this whole, for want of a better word, patriarchal system, or this whole consumerist society, economic shite that we've built up. Sorry.
It's all good.
It's becoming more and more transparent that this construct is just actually doing us so much damage, and doing the environment so much damage, doing our nature so much damage, doing nature and our nature so much damage. So what are we doing? Mm-hmm. And these tales, these old myths and legends and fairy tales, they bring forward a wisdom of how to be with the land, and how to live together with the land, and how to navigate, and how to trust magic, and how to relate to the spiritual and the soul elements, how to see the spirit in nature, how to actually feel more at one, rather than this, just skimming on the top of the surface and just not landing anywhere, no roots, no nothing. The stories are the roots that I'm searching for, to actually feel I can breathe and I can live truly, who I want, how I want to live, and to truly express who I truly am. So for that, I feel like the stories are for adults, and have always been for adults. And it's like the children listen as well, because when children listen, it washes over them, and they take what they can from it at the time. But it's like this wash of soul nurturing, that they carry as a seed, and at some point the seed will sprout into understanding. It's like you can tell children those horrible endings of, the terrible witch having to put on red hot iron shoes and dance until she falls down dead, the punishment of being put in a barrel and being of nails and being rolled down a hill by a team of 4 white horses, or whatever it is. You can tell those things because it's in the deep soul level, those images are true, and there's something where you go, that is right. That is a right ending for that archetype. That is a right ending for that character, to feel like, yes, balance is restored in the world of the story. We are back in harmony. We are, because that's the beauty of those tales, that they end, that they always, to me, quite often, they tend to end where balance is restored, and we lack that a lot in our culture. We just never, we're so out of balance, we just have no idea what that even looks like, hence the sugarcoating desire, I think, because we can't cope with it.
So do you, I perceive it as a deep soul remembering the fairy tales, is how I perceive it.
Yeah.
Why do you think a lot of modern people dismiss fairy tales? Why do you think they do that?
It's too simple. It's too easy. Their stories are too simple. But the thing is, what I feel is, in fact, that the stories weren't simple to begin with, and that they were steeped in reality to some degree, and that over time, it's like this sort of superfluous detail, names of people, or the correct location, or gets stripped away and stripped away and stripped away until like this essence gets chewed over. So it becomes the old woman that lives on the edge of the forest. It doesn't really matter which forest and which country you're in, or which you know, it's the archetype of the old woman and the archetype of the forest and the edge of the forest, you know, the village at the edge of the forest, and, you know, or, yeah, and it becomes symbolic and it becomes metaphoric, and it's like that everything gets just distilled into this essence. It's like a distillation. So I feel like it's like a it's a condensed form of wisdom, you know, that you can just like wow, you know, that has just and it's like you take this little condensed thing and then you just maybe it is like a seed, you know, and you plant it in your own, you know, your own little soul, your own little heart space, and then you bloom it out into your own version of, well, what makes sense to you and how you bring this story now, you know, so it blooms out of you in a really different way to everybody else. So if you know, I feel like as true oral storytelling is that you take the bones, the bare bones and the essence of something like that, and you flesh it, you know, you flesh it out again with your life, with your situation, with your forest, with your old woman now, you know, with your this is me now, this makes sense to me now, and that's what you bring. So it's like this really interesting, the really ancient sitting with the really now, the present moment, rolling out.
That's how stories have always changed, and as a storyteller telling it, you're telling it differently every time. So, but also you bring, like you say, you bring yourself to the story. So the story is changing with every telling. And I guess what we've done is we've fixed Grimm's. Rapunzel doesn't have sex with the prince and have twins in the Grimm's version, but in the original, she does. So that's been changed, and then from that, then we changed, and then we've got feminist perspective, and you know, they just get changed and changed and changed. And the way I sort of sit with that is a lot of them have been changed on a really superficial level. In modern culture. And so they're actually not getting to the depth, what you're talking about, the depth of the story, the depth of the original, the heart resonance, I guess, of what came first. It's like Cinderella turns into Cinderfella. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is much, much deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, right? Because I feel like because the fairy tales are so powerful in their essence, I feel like we can do all this kind of glib stuff, right? And you know, and stuff got changed already at the recording, you know, of you know, like you were saying, when the Grimms wrote down those fairy tales, they came at it with a very male, very upper middle class, very a Christian perspective. But you know, and we our Western culture, for want of a better word, or that European culture, you know, we revere the written word now, you know, so we kind of tend to revere what got recorded rather than, you know, trusting that there might be some older versions that we can also kind of find and research. But I'm kind of getting off the point. But yeah, I feel like, you know, some of these superficial reinterpretations, they're also fine, because I feel like there's something about the story itself, the essence of the story, that wants to be, it's coming up from the earth and wants to be seen and wants to be heard, wants to be told, and it all contributes to that kind of picture, you know. So it's like, yes, we've distilled it down over time, but we also need to just allow stuff to blossom how it blossoms. But there is a dichotomy there for me, because on the other hand, you know, from as far as I know, from what I understand, how the Indigenous people here, at least in Western Australia, that I vaguely know of, and you know, and it's tricky because, of course, you know, as as a white person that's a migrant, like first generation migrant, I feel like I'm only grappling with sort of vague understandings of things. But from how I understand how songlines or the old stories get just sort of taught and then continue on, that there is a particular person who is entrusted with a portion of that story, and that they learn that story. They kind of, begin learning that as children, and then they go through various rites of passages as sort of the story carrier, and then as an elder and so on as a story carrier, and you get told the story and you need to learn it. It's almost like you need to learn it verbatim, like word for word for word for word, because so much cultural and everything else, like biological, all sorts of knowledge of all different what we deem fields of knowledge is embedded in those stories. So they need to be transmitted as closely as possible in order to stop the Chinese whispers, right? Because oral storytelling is all they've got. They don't have it written down. They can't go, 200 years ago, this is how we told it. So there is this need for precision and to remember it exactly. And so I'm also interested in how different that sits with our current storytelling of, you can kind of, as long as it comes from your heart, you make all the changes you want. Do you know what I mean? So it's also interesting because I feel like there is something about protecting something about the essence of what feels true about the stories and stripping it back down to the bones and the essence. And sometimes it is a written down version, but yeah, and I think it would still be great to remember and capture, if there are still any older women, in country kitchens all over Europe, who still remember how their mothers and their grandmothers told that story, to actually go, well, that's almost, that's also some gold there to kind of go, well, that, that gets us closer to this idea of what the Indigenous people are talking about, that original essence.
Well, that's a good project anyway for a folklorist in Europe.
Look, Oh, no. There's, folklorists. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm sort of sitting. I feel like I'm sitting both with it's really great. The more versions, the better, because it means the story has air and breath and is in people's consciousness. Also to remember and revere the bedrock of where those cultures originate from, because even though they are simple and easily dismissed, I feel like they are, to me, bring forth, soul work that is really important right now in this time of, it feels like we're in a real cultural shift. Where the old system, the old Rome feels like it's really at death's door. The old empire is dying of how we have perceived and the world views that we have created, and something new needs to come in. And I feel like the fairy tales, to me, I revert back to them because they hold some wisdom that I feel will need to carry me through that dark period of not knowing what on earth to do next.
I guess your grandmother was also carrying your mother through dark times with stories.
Oh my gosh, yes, it was absolutely. I mean, a terrifying, awful time. Where the women were looking after children and being, bombed out of houses and horrible stuff. Where sort of all the. Yeah.
I'm reminded of the Chesterton quote that Neil Gaiman revived, which was, the fairy tales are not that dragons exist, but that they can be defeated. And I think that's...
Oh, dragons exist.
you know, that's the quote.
Yes, sorry.
The fairy tale. I mean, I'm with you. I'm all about the fantastical. No dramas in that at all. I'm interested. I mean, because you've got a theatre background, I'm quite interested in the line between what is theatre and what is storytelling. What is that line?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm sitting still in a bit of the dark with that, because because they're like sister traditions, and they're entwined to me, very much entwined, and I'm always tempted to go more towards theatre. Yeah. But there is also something really lovely about the simplicity of someone even potentially sitting on a chair, or just standing in front of just a group of informal people and telling a story. No props, no lights, no sound, no special effects, no set design, no fluff, and it's just that spellbinding, being the audience being taken, into this other world, into this other realm, just by the sheer imagination of the storyteller rolling these imaginary pictures out in their minds, and the audience going along for the ride, and seeing them as they roll out. And I guess in terms of my theatre, I've always been quite interested in stripping theatre down to that bare essential of just that, a powerful storyteller, performer, rolling that out. I've always been, of the mind of, like the bare essentials of lights, the bare essentials of set, the bare essentials of props. But yeah, there is there is also something, about the magic of theatre where to kind of it becomes bigger when it's a piece of theatre. Usually you will have more actors on stage. You will be able to. There's more play. There's more play in how a story can get expressed and what it can be expressed with. You can bring in dance and movement. You can bring in, you just can bring in lots of different elements that can, in theory, enhance the story and make it more magical, make it really more magical. That I and maybe it's that sort of childlike thing in me, but there is something magical about a spotlight on a person, like in a dark room, it's like, wow.
I guess for me, the spotlight disconnects me from the audience, being able to gaze into people's eyes and bounce off their reactions. And the spotlight, you lose that ability to connect. That's my experience.
Yeah. And look,
I mean, it's still fun, but yeah.
Yes, and I do understand your purpose, but there is something, and I guess as a theatre director, what I try to cut through, in fact, is that even though the spotlight it kind of disconnects you in terms of being able to see with your visual eyes the audience because you're blinded, but that if you if you are if as a performer, if you bring all of yourself, all of your soul to the story and to what you're speaking and what you're moving and what you're conveying, with your body, and having that sense of trust, you still get that sense of the audience back. You are absolutely giving and receiving with the audience, whether you actually see them visually or not. That there is that bringing the gods up from the ground, there is still, and that it goes below the superficial and drops down into something else. So there is something about the ritualistic aspect of traditional theatre that still has a power for me, that feels like that there is still a way, and that's probably also, like I love doing the theatre performance of The Fisherman and His Wife, because there was something in there for me about bringing the story alive in a really quite different way to if it was just me telling that story, as a storyteller. But both are incredibly powerful, and both are incredibly valid. I feel. But there is. There is
one of the things I've observed after interviewing over 60 people now is that every single storyteller has something that they bring, whether it's dance or a love of history or theatre or there's a whole range of skills that we bring, and it's the skills that we bring when we're in our authentic self that is what storytelling is. And one's not better than the other. It's a bit like a hairdresser. I'll go to some hairdressers, but I won't go to others, like you. And the same with storytellers. There are some that I go, not for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's, and similarly, it's the way it goes.
The same with theatre, there's certain theatre that I go, wow, that is so amazing, and a friend sitting next to me can go, oh my God, this is just such a pile of,
it's all depends on our own perspective. So this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling. What do you think is at the heart of storytelling?
The heart of storytelling. Well, I feel like it's me putting my feet into the mud of this primordial substance, that's like rotting animal, rotting plant, sand, granite, rock, water, where nothing has form and it's all sort of mushed together, and it makes this silky layer of something that my feet have stepped into, and calling that up. It's like, I feel like there is such a powerful spirit or entity that sits, it just like we just sit on it, that wants to speak through us. That's like this, the energy that's bigger than us, that makes that makes our soul journey relevant or important, or gives us purpose and meaning, that is sort of underneath us and all around us. And storytelling brings it up for me. It brings it through me. I feel like if I can sit there and old beings and old entities and old wisdoms can speak through me and roll through me, I feel like that makes me come alive, and I'm hopeful, that it also then makes others kind of like come alive, and that we think about, about life being more than just surviving, that little hamster wheel where we just, you know, we go to work and we pay our mortgage and we do the blah, 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 and we're exhausted and we're tired and we just do everything, blah, 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 to kind of go, oh, there's so much more to life than this, you know, and look at the starry sky and look at what it feels like when the moon is dark or when the moon is full. Look at this, look at these trees, you know, look at this life all around me. I don't know, look, you know, like, yeah, storytelling gives me a chance to take a breath and take stock and go, what is my life all about? You know, how do I make an impression on the scroll of time and space and our culture?
That's really beautiful. No one's ever said that before.
Oh,
so you're winning. I mean, I usually follow up with the question, why do we need storytelling today? But we did really touch upon that when we were talking about the fairy tales. But did you have anything more to add about why we need the art of storytelling today?
Well, you know, for that, I think for people to see, to look into their hearts and kind of go, well, what am I on this earth to do? You know, what am I here for? What am I really wanting? What am I really loving? Who am I really, and how do I express that? You know, and how do I live my life fully, that I'm not just this sort of shadowy visitor, you know, but how do I live so that I'm really, you know, really here and really, really express my gifts and who I'm here to who I'm here to be, you know? So, yeah, I feel like we need that so much today, because I feel like everyone is just either so caught up in, you know, phone, social media, they're blah, 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 you know, all this sort of modern stuff, you know, technology is just going kind of nanas, and everyone feels disconnected and everyone feels alone and everyone feels depressed and everyone feels like that's the seemingly, you know, what our collective is talking about, you know, and it's like, oh gosh, you know, stories just, you know, just see the beauty and just trust. So like, what's the mud under your feet here, you know, what wants to come and speak through you, you know? There's just, you know, the dragons and the gods and all these beings are sitting underneath us going, hey man, give us a chance to, you know, come up and out through you. Give us a chance.
Well, you've been amazing. Have you got some... there's a couple of things that if you wanted to offer some advice on setting up a ritual space for storytelling, maybe community storytelling or any other aspect of storytelling that you'd like to... Any advice that you'd like to give people?
I'm still grappling with that ritual, even though I kind of said, you know, you can make a ritual. I like the little, you know, that little bit of ritual that feels like, you know, before a story starts, you know, you sort of go, yeah, I'm going to, or at least the way I tell, I'm going to tell a story, and you do this sort of embarrassment polka and blah, blah, blah. But then there is this sort of sense of, I take a breath, and actually the way I do it, you know, I breathe in a breath from the center of the earth, and I feel like I send a monkey's tail down that kind of curls down on a rock at the very center of the earth, and I go, here I am. And that is where the words come out, and that the simple act of saying something like once upon a time, you know, really starts the story rolling, you know, like those sort of true and trite kind of cliche beginnings and endings. There's something to them that, again, you know, where it feels right, you know, it feels like, yeah, I feel that in my bones and my DNA. And yeah, I mean, community storytelling, you know, I'm always surprised. I've been pleasantly surprised how many people in Denmark come to these storytelling events, because I feel like there is this real thirst for, come and tell us, wow, I love it, just to be sitting in a space and to hear 3 or 4 little fairy tales. And I also still get this, friends and, acquaintances kind of going, so what are you doing? I don't quite understand. And why does it take 3 hours? And do we have to come for the whole time? It's like, well, you can come for a little bit and see if you want to stay the whole time. I think, there's something nice about and very easy about storytelling, because you don't need anything. You can just say, hey, can advertise the time and space, hire a little community hall and say, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you 2 or 3 stories, whatever it is, get some friends together and just do it and see what comes. I feel like there is energy in that.
Amazing. Now, I've already spoken to you about how people can contact you, but do you have any place that people can come find you?
No, I'm very anti-social media, so I have got absolutely nothing.
That's all right.
I've got an email, the Great Southern Storytellers @gmail.com, and that's about it.
That's all we need. There's one place to contact you. Email is good.
Yes. And I do still look at my emails.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Silvia. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
If you've enjoyed the podcast and would like to support me to continue the work that I'm doing, please head to buymeacoffee.com/Alyssa Curtain and make a donation or sign up for a subscription. This is a passion project, and as such, it is voluntary. So your donations make it easier for me to continue this work. Thank you for your support. Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairytale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling, and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alyssacurtain.com or at Alyssa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.